Good morning. My name is Donna Llewellyn, and I'm the Executive Director of the Boise State Institute for Inclusive and Transformative Scholarship, IFITS, where I like to say IFITS, you fits, we all fits. IFITS is the home of the Office of Undergraduate Research, and so we are really excited to help facilitate today's Undergraduate Research Showcase. Please help use the hashtag URS 2021 and use social media throughout today. I have the honor of co-chairing the Undergraduate Research Showcase 2021 Planning Committee with my colleague, Michal Martinez. And our whole planning committee welcomes you to this morning's plenary presentation of Student Lightning Talks. I invite our viewers to listen with grace and generosity of spirit. It has been a long year of many, many Zoom sessions, and I know that you can all understand that we can't guarantee that everyone's technology will work perfectly. Our students are giving their talks from their homes or wherever they're living and studying right now, and so we know that some of the sound might be muffled or a bit broken up, or someone's connection might break at exactly the wrong moment. We are so proud of our students. And we are recording this session, and we'll post it from the Office of Undergraduate Research website probably early next week. Before we get started, I would like to honor the Boise Valley people. The original inhabitants are from Burns Paiute, Confederate tribes of Warm Springs, the Fort McDermott Paiute, the Shoshone Paiute, and the Shoshone Bannock. It is upon their traditional and customary lands that some of us reside and call home, and upon which our campus stands ready to welcome us back to gather in person when it is safe. As a reminder, there are feedback forms on the event Google site. Someone will put the link of that site into the chat window at some point for all of you. And undergrads, your feedback form enters you to win a great prize. You do have to be present at the closing session to win, though. We're going to start with a welcome from Boise State University President Marlene Tromp. And after we hear from President Trump, Michal will lead this session as our MC.
Congratulations, students, on completing your research projects, and welcome to today's showcase. I look forward to seeing your incredible work and your passion for your chosen fields. Our university set a research record this year, even among the COVID challenges. You, our students, along with our faculty, are incredibly resilient. And the special challenges you have faced together during this difficult period will serve you throughout your life. And the remarkable thing is that your capacity to bring your talents to the world will also serve others. As you have learned, research provides such unique experiences, a whole new kind of learning. It develops your ability to be a leader and an innovative thinker. Research and student success are deeply intertwined at the heart of Boise State's mission. Congratulations, Broncos, and thank you to those of you who are here today to learn from our extraordinary students.
So thank you, Dr. Tromp, and on behalf of the Planning Committee, I'd like to thank Dr. Tromp not only for today's welcome message, but also for her staunch support of undergraduate research. Hi, everyone. My name is Michal Martinez, and I'm a faculty member in the English department and the faculty associate for the Office of Undergraduate Research. I'm delighted to serve as your MC this morning. This is our second year featuring a plenary lightning session during the Undergraduate Research Showcase. The Planning Committee came up with this idea as a way to showcase and celebrate some of our more advanced students' research. Many of our speakers today will actually be graduating in just a few short weeks. And we're delighted that their mentors nominated them to share their research with us. We have 16 students from across campus, spanning in disciplines from education to engineering to global studies and nursing. Their research topics piqued the interest of the selection committee, and we hope that you are as impressed with the breadth and depth of their work as we are. Each student has been working diligently over the past few months alongside their faculty mentors and their Lightning Talk coaches to fit the details of their research into a tight 3-minute presentation. Donna and I hope to have a short moderated Q&A session at the end of the time together this morning. And I invite you to type your question using the Q&A function in Zoom. It should be at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions geared towards one student's research or write a more general question for any of the presenters to respond to. So without further ado, let's get started. Our first presenter today is Kate Carter-Cram, who will be telling us about her research on the importance of reflection in ensuring inclusive practices in writing center work. Kate, take it away.
Programs and service providers on university campuses must take into consideration the diversity of their students' experiences, backgrounds, and identities in order to support their students in an inclusive manner. For 3 years, I have been a consultant, mentor, writer, and researcher in the Boise State Writing Center. The Writing Center aspires to be inclusive and accessible to all. It's a place for writers of all levels and abilities, from diverse backgrounds with varied experiences and interests, and its student staff is trained not only to help with the technical aspects of writing, but also to support writers holistically. My own impression is that of all of the spaces I've been in on the Boise State campus, the Writing Center gathers the greatest number of diverse people together. The field of Writing Center studies prides itself on its tendency to be more progressive and inclusive than other fields. However, as a consultant in the space, I wasn't sure how much of this disciplinary philosophy was actually being put into practice on a regular basis, other than during training. As a student in the user experience program, in the fall of 2020, I decided to undertake a project analyzing the experience of student consultants with diversity and the implications of their choices and their backgrounds. Several researchers have studied diversity in Writing Center contexts. Given that Writing Centers value diversity, it is commonly understood that the voices of all who use the center must be empowered in order to help shape the work done in the space. In doing so, Writing Centers can move beyond superficial adjustments to allow for true change to occur, to more inclusively serve the individuals who use centers. As with much of the work on diversity and inclusion, all individuals in the Writing Center must be willing to risk public failure and to accept the uncertainty that comes with this line of work. In my study, I conducted semi-structured interviews with 6 consultants to ask about their thoughts on personal and shared definitions of diversity, as well as the Writing Center's practices related to inclusion. Following our interviews, to better understand their motives and biases when working with different writers, I reviewed each consultant's comments on 2 to 3 of their asynchronous consultations. I identified specific choices made by the consultants and discussed these with each consultant to better understand their actions. I then gauged their perspectives about ways to alter Writing Center mindsets, practices, and training sessions. My findings show that putting our disciplinary philosophy into practice cannot simply be done by checking items off of a list. It is a process that can take many different forms and have distinct applications. To become more inclusive and accessible, Writing Centers must continually encourage reflection, vulnerability, and honesty, and push diversity to become a safe goal for all individuals, while still acknowledging the risk of uncertainty and failure in this work. The insights from my research help shape how future policies and methods are created and implemented. As a result of continual responsible reflection, Writing Centers can ground themselves in what they claim to value to bridge the gap between theory and practice as centers move beyond, at Writing Centers and universities continue to evolve in order to form a Writing Center space wherein all individuals feel equitably supported and accepted. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Kate. Up next, we have Claire Elise Alexandra Catherine Connor, whose timely research this year looked at the impact of virtual instruction brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic on early special education students. Go ahead, Claire.
Thanks, Michal. Maya Angelou once said, if you don't know where you're going, where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. Just like if you're looking at this map and say, I want to go there, you'll have no idea how to get there unless you can also point to where you are. I study early and special education. Those in my field point to equitable and accessible services and say, let's be there. But the COVID-19 pandemic has put us in uncharted territory. I researched how virtual instruction has affected the services pre-K students with disabilities receive to know where we're at in relation to where we want to be. Students with documented disabilities receive an individualized education program, or IEP. An IEP outlines any goal, academic, social, emotional, or communication specific to one child. It also includes how those goals will be monitored. I reviewed the IEPs of 8 local students written prior to the pandemic, as well as documents that monitored their progress through the most recent quarter. Then I surveyed a total of 20 parents and teachers of preschool-age children with disabilities. I found 3 major codes from survey comments and progress monitoring data: social emotional learning, parent responsibility in education, and data reliability. The details of these codes puts us on the map. Where are we in relation to the appropriate education we strive for? First, social emotional learning is the building block for all skills children learn in a classroom. Survey respondents said not being in a classroom meant children didn't have the opportunity to practice crucial skills like sharing, responding, or managing emotions with peers. Of 29 goals across 8 students, the only ones that could not be implemented in a virtual setting were select social emotional goals. Another major change was parents' responsibilities during virtual instruction. Teachers indicated that the quality of services children received depended on how often the parents engaged them in activities. But parents responded in my survey and in national surveys that they did not have the time to ensure their child was attending virtual classes or monitor their progress. Teachers and parents indicated that when parents did collect data, they didn't feel it was necessarily accurate or could guide future instruction, which is really concerning when we look to set IEP goals for the upcoming year. However, a few responses showed that by seeing what their children worked on each day, parents felt equipped to support students' goals at home. This is really exciting because research shows bridging school to home gaps can dramatically improve academic and social outcomes. Now, you might not have young students with disabilities in your life, but we are all going back to a new normal that won't be normal. When you point and say, I want to be there when we return in person, you must take into account what has brought you further from your destination. In this case, a lack of social emotional development or unreliable data, as well as how you're closer to your end goal, like a homeschool connection. I look forward to sharing more factors in my poster session because we don't know where we're going unless we know where we've been. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Claire. Our next presenter is Grace Coughlin, who will be talking to us about looking for ways to regulate a small protein whose unregulated signaling activities have really negative effects on patients of a variety of diseases, including cancer and COVID-19. Grace, take it away.
Thank you, Michal. We all know the classic story of the Wizard of Oz. As Dorothy travels with her companions to find the wizard and return home, she encounters the villain, the Wicked Witch of the West, who will do anything to get the ruby slippers back. While in the less familiar Broadway play Wicked, the witch's story is told. Without spoiling anything, know that the witch is not evil by nature, even though her actions appear nefarious. There is a conflict of perspectives between the two stories. The witch becomes a dichotomy of good and evil. My name is Grace Coughlin, and I work with a small signaling protein, oncostatin M, that is the witch of our story. When regulated correctly, OSM signaling activity is beneficial. It promotes inflammation and contributes to tissue repair for wound healing after an injury. However, evidence in the literature has shown that overexpression of OSM signaling induces breast cancer metastasis. Metastasis is when cancer cells detach from a primary tumor and enter into the bloodstream. Then the cells migrate and create secondary tumors, notably in the bones and lungs. Often, when family and friends die from breast cancer, it is because the cancer metastasized. In patients with rheumatoid arthritis, oncostatin M increases joint destruction, and most recently, high levels of OSM have been correlated with sepsis-induced deaths and a sustained dysregulated inflammatory response in patients with COVID-19. Yet the specific role OSM plays in the disease is still unknown. In my organic chemistry lab, I researched small molecule inhibitors to inhibit the wicked ways of OSM. I feel like I've been traveling the yellow brick road to Oz, because with the known structure and receptor binding site of this protein, I walk this path to design and synthesize the perfect drug that will bind to OSM and prevent its signaling abilities. This is shown by the gray space-filling structure bound to the tan protein blob on your screen. The process requires the creation and testing of a vast library of small molecules. With my lab partner, I've synthesized a field full of 30 different compounds following a 3-step reaction procedure. With each new molecule I made, I changed one of the 3 parts of the parent molecule inhibitor shown in the path. For instance, I synthesized a molecule with a different group in the top right region of the center molecule, then another molecule with a different group in region B in the left part of the molecule that you see, and finally, I modified the center region of that middle molecule. Then I tested each compound's ability in order to determine which features contributed to optimal interactions with the target protein. Hopefully, with every molecule I make, I step closer to Emerald City. And with the magic of the ruby slippers, I create a drug that binds the tightest to OSM with ideal drug properties. By halting the detrimental effects of OSM, the witch can be a hero instead of the villain, and the patients can triumph over their diseases. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Grace. Up next, we have a presentation by Caleb Cram about an exciting project that he and his teammates are involved with to help NASA astronauts during their spacewalks. Go ahead, Caleb.
Hi, my name is Caleb Cram, and I'm the current BSU NASA Suits team lead. Suits, which stands for Spacesuit User Interface Technologies for Students, is an ongoing challenge presented by NASA to gather software ideas and prototypes from college students around the world to create a system that can help NASA improve autonomy, efficiency, and efficacy of communication between mission control and an astronaut physically on the moon. One massive challenge that NASA faces is how to actually implement augmented reality into a spacesuit. It seems simple at first, but there's a multitude of software and hardware difficulties that have yet to be solved. For example, the HoloLens 2 augmented reality headset works by projecting light onto a flat lens directly in front of the user's eyes, which can create the illusion of holograms in your vision. However, this technology is being completely re-engineered to work with the spacesuit due to the fact that holograms need to appear on the curved dome of the visor, which inherently will not work with the current solution. In answer to these challenges, we've developed ARSYS 4.0, which seamlessly integrates augmented reality, virtual reality, and a desktop portal to create a cohesive mixed reality experience that we are calling telepresence. On the screen, you can see an image that was captured from within the HoloLens portal that shows a use case of mission control helping guide an astronaut out of the space by placing directions and commands spatially with the VR and desktop portals. The red exit and welcome to ARSYS were hand-drawn in the VR portal, while arrows, cubes, circles, and other symbols can be placed by the desktop portal to help guide the user out of the space. Additionally, you can see mission-critical information that is displayed in the astronaut's vision, including a map with distance to the next target, and on the center right of the image, a window for biometrics, which tracks things like oxygen and CO2 buildup within the system. This system will alert both the astronaut and mission control if a biometric falls outside of the safe range. Below that are the procedures which can help guide astronauts through complex missions and tasks in a way that is intuitive and non-invasive. Beneath that is the field notes system, which is used to capture images of the sample along with the location and necessary information. These various menus can be navigated using intuitive voice commands, eye tracking, gaze tracking, as well as hand tracking, allowing the user to utilize whatever control method feels natural. Moving forward, our team will send our HoloLens 2 to NASA for testing, at which point we will act as mission control from Idaho via our VR and desktop portals, which we will use to guide the astronaut through a series of tests and challenges. The capabilities provided by ARSYS improve situational awareness and more effectively equip astronauts for the unpredictable environments they'll face, while helping mission control maintain a clear understanding of what is transpiring during a mission via telepresence so they can more effectively guide and communicate with the astronaut. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Caleb. In our next presentation, Mandy Edmonds will be sharing her research on the practice of plissage in colonial Louisiana. Mandy, take it away.
Thank you, Michal. Meet Lulu White, the diamond queen of the demi-monde, one of the most successful brothel madams of New Orleans in the early 1900s. Coined in France, demi-monde literally translates to half-world and was used to describe women who were on the fringes of respectable society. Adding weight to this title bestowed to her, White and the girls in her care were considered octoroons, meaning they had 1/8 Black heritage. While these women were highly sought after in the state for their services, it was made very clear that it was only within the location and context of Storyville, where the brothel was housed, that this enthusiasm existed. In order to try and understand this dichotomy of existence, we must refer back to the late 17th century colonial Louisiana. In the early years of the French colony, settlers continued a practice they had begun in Saint-Dominique known as plaçage, in which they engaged in a premarital relationship with a woman of color. Even if the colonists married later down the line, if they were wealthy enough, they often maintained the relationship with their placiers, as these women were titled, and sometimes went on to have multiple families in this form. Initially, Louisiana was fairly gracious regarding these arrangements and occasionally offered emancipation to children produced from them, giving rise to a class of free persons of color. However, Louis XIV was unenthused about the plaçage system that had developed in his colonies, and in 1724 issued an edict known as the Code Noir, a civil and legal code concerned with the behavior and treatment of slaves and free persons of color. In this document, Louis states, "We forbid our white subjects of either sex from contracting marriage with blacks, and also forbid our said white subjects from living in concubinage with slaves." In records from this period, there are several references to the classification of free persons of color based on the percentage of their black ancestry, such as mulatto, quadroon, and the aforementioned octoroon, equating 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8 respectively. Despite Louis' decree, plaçage arrangements continued, and there are even stories of quadroon balls, which white men attended with the intent of finding women to contact as their placier. While researching these liaisons, I wondered how the plaçage system could continue to exist so openly within the colony if there were consequences for both colonists and the persons of color who engaged in them. Observing portraits of women who fell into quadroon and octoroon classifications, I couldn't help but notice they typically had white characteristics, especially the latter. Given that documents after 1724 consistently refer to quadroon or octoroon designations, my theory is the affairs were sustained because on the surface, it would appear the colonists had obeyed the decree and were engaging in appropriate relationships. However, one critical void in information is what happened to placiers after their protector had left them. The most prevalent form of income outside of an exclusive plaçage arrangement that I've discovered has been prostitution, bringing us back to Lulu White. White appears to have capitalized upon the eroticism of mixed-race women by running an octoroon parlor known as the Mahogany House, designed for exclusively white men to enjoy. White also conceived her own version of a blue book, a catalog of local sex workers, which she used to hype up her girls' exoticism. Although White enjoyed grand success in this sector, at every turn she was reminded of her Black heritage, with the insult of notorious negress often used by the press, and she was eventually run out of New Orleans for violating the Draft Act of 1917. Ultimately, White, just as many other mixed-race women, perfectly embodied her demi-monde title, essentially riding on the outskirts of both physical and racial designations, unable to exist in either space. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. Our next presenter is Alejandra Hernandez, whose research looks at the different layers involved in inclusive research, especially when working with vulnerable populations. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Thank you, Michal. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandra Hernandez, and I'm currently working alongside Dr. Curl on her research. The research is specifically looking at the sources of pesticide exposure on pregnant women in Idaho. We are specifically looking at the pesticide Roundup that farmers sometimes use around the field. In the last couple of weeks, we have been collecting urine samples, and eventually we'll be sending them to the CDC to check for pesticide exposure. In this study, it is important to recruit pregnant women from different populations to make sure that we are representing all of the women that could possibly be affected by this. In Dr. Curl's research, it was very intentional and thought out to make sure that all the paperwork was translated to Spanish because there was possibilities of having participants that were going to be Spanish speaking only. I was able to help with translating, and currently I have been able to recruit some Spanish participants. And while I was doing this, I started analyzing and discovering that there are multiple layers when a researcher wants to do inclusive research that can get very complicated if it's not thought out before. When translating and interpreting, it is important to know that you cannot just Google a word in the language that your participants may be speaking. The same way that you must make your paperwork according to the audience is the same way you must translate appropriately to the certain community or population. You must make sure that you make things culturally appropriate. So sometimes an interpreter might not be enough, and instead somebody from that community may be better because they will know the culture, the values, and the beliefs of that community, and how to approach them accordingly. For example, different cultures or countries may have two types of the same language, a respectful language and a casual language. Sometimes you may get away with speaking the casual language, and sometimes it may just affect your ability to research that community because you might have just accidentally disrespected them. In addition, it is important to know that marginalized communities are a vulnerable population. As researchers, we have to get done all the protocol technicality for the institutional review board. And it gets to the point that it's almost like checking a box and moving on to the next step. When working with these populations, you have to know that for somebody that's, for example, undocumented, confidentiality is everything, and explaining has to be more intentional and enunciate even more for them to gain trust. The questions that researchers may ask their participants are simple, although simple, may be invading somebody's privacy. Researchers have to note that participants are human beings just like anybody else, and a lot of these communities, their trust has been violated multiple times by people wanting to research them and doing a very bad job of not explaining their rights or having their confidential information be published without their consent. It's also important to know that when you are wanting to or doing inclusive research, it's really helpful to have somebody who knows the culture, the beliefs and the values of that community, and also knows the science behind the research, the data that you want to collect, and know how to best approach the community. An example of that person is me. From my personal experience, I know I have an advantage because I can tell that when I speak to the participants and they know I speak Spanish, there's this level of comfort. But also being from the culture, I know that what questions they may be hesitant about, such as the ones on the slide, what things I should repeat a little bit more to make sure they understand. And also, I know what data the researcher wants and if it'll be possible to attain from a specific community or what can be changed to attain that data. Inclusive research is made of multiple layers: the culture, the language, the science behind the research, etc. And it should be done because this is fascinating research. But it's also not worth it to take everything into consideration with your methodologies so it can be done right and appropriately. Thank you.
Thanks, Alejandra. Our next presentation will be by Daum Jung on the role of nurses in improving patients' experiences and outcomes after surgeries. Go ahead, Daum.
Thank you, Michal. Imagine you have received surgery and you have just woken up, not completely worn off from anesthesia, surrounded by unfamiliar environments and faces. How would you feel? Confusion and restlessness that occur after the surgery is called postoperative delirium. Research has shown that older patients are more likely to experience this confusion, and it can lead to permanent cognitive changes and discharge to skilled nursing facilities rather than returning to their homes. Delirium can also have an impact on hospitals and institutions as it increases the cost of care. Looking at the poor outcomes that result from postoperative delirium, my question was, what can nurses do to decrease delirium incidence and manage the outcomes? To answer this question, studies have been searched from 2015 to 2020 using various databases and key terms. In the selected articles, the participants mostly included geriatric patients who had their surgeries. After the surgery, the nurses were providing special interventions, such as promoting early mobilization, assessing pain frequently, encouraging family members to visit, and decreasing environmental stimuli among the intervention groups. In response to these specific nursing care, the studies demonstrated decreased delirium incidence and improved patient outcomes, including decreased delirium severity, duration, length of hospital stay, and mortality. Considering that nurses spend a lot of time with their patients and have the ability and knowledge to assess them, the nursing care explained previously can be incorporated into their daily practice quite easily. However, we need to look at whether the hospital is encouraging nurses to implement these practices in their care or educating nurses on postoperative delirium. There have been multiple studies already conducted on how interprofessional teams, including healthcare providers, pharmacists, nurses, and physical therapists can work together to prevent delirium, but not many studies focused on nurses specifically. Thus, there's a need for more research that will evaluate the effectiveness of nursing interventions in preventing and managing postoperative delirium. In future research, we could also explore which specific nursing interventions are the most effective in preventing delirium and how these changes in our practice can impact the overall health of our population. Thank you.
Thank you, Daum. Up next, we will be hearing from Sunwoo Jung, whose research looks at some interesting properties of water at the molecular or nanoscale level. Take it away, Sunwoo.
Thank you, Michal. So we all know that there are three types of water: ice, liquid, and vapor. And physicists have learned that each one behaves differently at a molecular level. Out of these three types, liquid water is the most abundant form of water on Earth and is the liquid form with the most unique properties. Scientists have long believed that life on Earth is possible because of the presence of liquid water. It is also very important in our lives as humans. We drink water in liquid form every day, and most biological systems run on liquid water through ion channeling. However, until recently, we weren't able to identify the structure of water on a nanoscopic scale. We knew that the water molecules consist of hydrogens and oxygens, and that each water molecule is attached through hydrogen bonding, but we didn't know exactly how those water molecules behave and create a structure in nanoscale. In the recent studies conducted in Professor Byung Kim's lab here at Boise State, a new type of structured water was discovered in the nanoscale. From these studies, the research team found that the water molecules align into a straight line, making a chain-like structure. Not only that, the research identified that the water goes through a transition between the two states, the chain-like water state and liquid water state. However, there was an unexpected loss of energy known as friction force during the experiment. To explain this friction force of water, I used the idea of the stochastic resonance. Stochastic resonance is a phenomenon where weak signals can be amplified by random noise signals through resonance, causing friction. We believe that the origin of friction force is from the stochastic resonance of the transition between the two states, the liquid water state to the chain-like water state. Being able to understand the origin of the friction force of water can be applied to many other systems, such as the mechanical systems in microscale and ion channeling in biological systems. In my poster presentation, I further detail my theoretical model deriving the friction force of water by applying the stochastic resonance. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunwoo. Our next presenter is Sierra Kistler, who will tell us about culturally appropriate ways of adjusting healthcare practices to address health disparities in Indigenous populations. Sierra?
Thanks, Michal. Across the world, the healthcare needs of communities vary drastically, highlighting the need for community-specific care to address healthcare disparity. A perfect example of this in action is a recently developed model of care used to treat chronic kidney disease in Zuni Pueblo, a project that I had the opportunity to work on this summer at the University of New Mexico. Kidney failure rates represent one of the largest healthcare costs in America. In fact, Medicare costs for people with chronic kidney disease, which I will now refer to as CKD, were over $84 billion in 2017. The prevalence of CKD is particularly high in Zuni Indians, where kidney failure rates are about 20 times higher than in the American population. Also concerning, the progression of CKD is significantly faster in these populations than in their white counterparts. In order to create an effective solution, it was first important to understand why CKD rates are so much higher in this population. My faculty member explained to me that the Zuni people are hesitant of Western medicine as there has been a long history of exploitation. They do not like to leave the comfort of their homes and are hesitant to do things like give blood. They, along with other ethnic groups, are also genetically predispositioned for kidney disease. In an attempt to mitigate this disparity, a new model of care called home-based kidney care was created. This model of care sought to create community-focused care that addressed the history and meets the specific needs of the Zuni people. Essentially, it was healthcare designed specifically for their needs. The model of care relied on the use of community health workers who were members of the community themselves, trained to provide point-of-care technology within patients' homes. A system was even developed to allow blood tests to be done, only needing a single drop of blood, which was able to be collected in the patient's home rather than a typical blood draw in a healthcare clinic setting. In order to test the effectiveness of home-based kidney care, a randomized controlled study consisting of 125 diabetic Zuni Indians was performed. Half of the participants received usual care and the other
home-based kidney care, and study variables tied to the progression of the disease, such as BMI and blood glucose levels were measured at the start and again at the end of the study. The hope was that home-based kidney care would be more effective at lowering study variables tied to the progression of the disease. I was in charge of analyzing the data to compare treatment outcomes between the two groups. As I had zero experience in computer coding, my summer consisted of a lot of late nights huddled over my computer screen, but my findings made it all worthwhile. The results indicated that home-based kidney care, when compared to usual care, was much better at lowering variables tied to the progression of the disease. As this research has demonstrated, home-based kidney care has shown great promise in treating chronic illness using community resources, highlighting the need for community-specific care. The plan for future research includes replicating this study, which has already been approved and funded. Future research could also be done to see if this model could be further extrapolated to approach other healthcare disparities. Healthcare models such as this could be the future of treating chronic illness in small communities. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Sierra. In our next presentation, Ashley Lovell will be discussing ways of improving the management of sagebrush restoration after wildfires. Go ahead, Ashley.
The sagebrush steppe, a major ecosystem in the Intermountain West, faces a slew of disturbances, like any other ecosystem. These disturbances, like ranching and farming, climate change, fires, invasive species, tend to coincide and worsen the effects of each other, which is plainly evident here in the cheatgrass fire cycle, which I will explain next. On the surface, in a healthy ecosystem, like the image on my left, a wildfire occurs, killing sagebrush and other native plants. The voids left after a fire are filled by fast-growing and resource-capitalizing species like cheatgrass, creating landscapes that are similar to or worse as the image on my right. These annual grasses set seed and die, leaving swaths of flammable plant materials in their wake, making the steppe more susceptible to wildfires. This cycle continues, more grass, more fire, more grass, more fire, effectively preventing sagebrush reestablishment. Meanwhile, under the surface, when a wildfire occurs, it also changes the soil properties, creating spaces that are more conducive for cheatgrass growth and that hinder native species growth. When cheatgrass takes hold, it further changes soil properties, promoting cheatgrass's growth and further changing soils. These soil changes reduce restoration success when we try and plant or reseed sagebrush after a fire. So how do we improve success? We first have to understand the changes that are happening in the soil following a fire, and then we have to learn how to counteract these changes. Understanding how soil properties change after a wildfire will help us to improve sagebrush restoration efforts. My research looks at a 243-acre fire from 1983, which has not had any restoration management, and even after almost 40 years, still has large areas with no sagebrush growth. I wanted to understand how soil properties change in a naturally recovering ecosystem, so I looked at various zones of recovery and compared soil physical, chemical, and biological properties across these regions. Within this site, among other data, we are seeing significant differences in pH, which indicates a recovery of soil properties from the invaded areas with no sagebrush to the areas outside the fire which were not burnt. This indicates that the zones with recovering sagebrush are able to help soil conditions recover towards pre-fire conditions, which should reduce invasive species growth in those areas while also promoting sagebrush reestablishment. Understanding these soil properties will help us to evaluate the changes following fires and allow us to apply that knowledge to the ever-present modern fires. By understanding and improving soil properties post-wildfire, we can hope to reduce invasive species growth in these areas while also promoting sagebrush reestablishment. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much for that, Ashley. Up next, we have Rosanna Lenhart, who will be telling us about ways to better understand 3D shapes in the astrosphere. Take it away, Rosanna.
Thank you, Michal. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, gravity bends light,
Now imagine an object so massive its gravitational pull distorts the image of an entire galaxy. This gravitational lensing, seen as arcs of light in this image, has been observed in large galaxy clusters. Galaxy clusters are the largest cosmic structures in our universe, containing hundreds to thousands of galaxies, like the objects in this image, and are dominated by dark matter represented by the blue. The current standard in gravitational lensing research assumes galaxy clusters are spherical, but they are actually more elliptical. The 3D shape of galaxy clusters impacts the gravitational lensing signal we observe. However, the 3D shape has primarily been studied in dark matter-only simulations, without taking into account the impact of gas. Dark matter is a mysterious matter that does not interact with light, but still exerts a gravitational pull. We live in a dark matter-dominated universe, giving it a crucial role in gravitational lensing. My research uses illustrious TNG simulations to analyze how resolution and the presence of gas affect the shape of galaxy clusters. Illustrious TNG is a public data set containing simulations of large sections of the universe. Each simulation can be run at 3 different levels of resolution, which control the amount of particles in each simulation, and also include a run with gas and dark matter, as well as a dark matter only run. I wrote code that plots out the dark matter particles in the cluster and applies a function which returns the 3D shape of the cluster. The more elliptical a cluster is, the more it resembles a football rather than a basketball. This process was repeated for multiple galaxy clusters at 2 different resolutions. Dark matter only runs and runs with gas and dark matter. Our results showed that runs with galaxy clusters containing gas particles are more spherical than the dark matter only runs. The pressure from the gas particles causes this round shape in the cluster. The clusters are also more elliptical in simulations with higher resolution. Since the higher resolution is more precise, it will be more accurate to observation. This project gives greater understanding to how gas and resolution impacts the 3D shape of galaxy clusters within simulations. We will soon compare these results with other simulations in literature with observations. The biggest telescopes in the world are currently observing the gravitational lensing of galaxy clusters. Our study will directly improve the interpretation of lensing signals and help us better understand the mysterious nature of dark matter. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rosanna. Our next presenter is Sarah McKitty, who will be talking with us about the importance of training future nurses to practice self-compassion in order to reduce burnout and high levels of turnover. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. Self-compassion is a growing area of interest, not just in healthcare, but in the broader conversations about wellness. However, it is well outpaced by the ever-rising rates of burnout and debilitating stress in the nursing field, which contribute to the current and projected nursing shortages in hospitals and faculty shortages in schools. Nurses are indeed needed at the bedside, but also at the front lines of public health, policy, research, and specialty areas like informatics. Compounded by the pandemic, nurses' reservoirs are being severely depleted, while rates of depression, anxiety, leaving the profession, and suicide are steadily increasing. Finally, in looking at new graduates, up to 33% of new nurses leave the workforce within the first 2 years, with a national average of 17% for turnover in overall registered nurses. In noting these relationships, organizations like the American Association of Colleges of Nursing and government agencies like the National Institutes of Health are calling for more attention and action to support our valuable nursing workforce. But then the next question is, how do we implement and cultivate the skill set for resilience and other buffers against burnout in nursing? In response to this question, my faculty mentor and I decided to examine student and faculty levels of self-compassion in order to garner a baseline understanding of where things are currently. What are some patterns? What are some gaps? I am going to discuss the connotations of self-compassion, a few preliminary findings, and the implications of it for everyone. Self-compassion is essentially the same as compassion, except it is the ability to turn that same understanding, acceptance, and love inward towards yourself so that you can have an increased awareness of what your needs are, how to attend to them,
and have the bandwidth to exercise it for others. Self-compassion works as an antidote to self-criticism and compassion fatigue. In a profession that promotes wellness and preventative health measures for patient populations, nursing programs should also instill knowledge and strategies for students and faculty to develop their own resilience and well-being. Self-care and holistic wellness are encouraged in our culture and in nursing programs. And as a nursing student at BSU, I can attest to this. But just like psychomotor skills that accompany clinical knowledge, you need to practice employing them and integrating them into your practice, as it is essentially a muscle that requires development. We utilize the software Qualtrics in creating a 76-question survey with tools measuring self-reported data on self-compassion, perceived stress, and professional quality of life, and participants utilized a Likert type scale for each. We recruited students and faculty associated with our 4 nursing programs at the School of Nursing at BSU. In some preliminary findings, we saw a striking pattern across the board of high levels of satisfaction with their work, low levels of self-forgiveness, and high levels of self-criticism in the presented scenarios. We hope to recommend ways to address this and provide evidence for curriculum changes, workshops, and simply to spark more dialogue. I want to close by emphasizing that this image and the increasing importance of self-compassion does not solely impact or stop with nurses, but continues and is amplified by nurses practicing it and sharing it with their patient populations. This will also hopefully contribute to critically important reevaluations of what our norms are in healthcare and higher education culture. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for sharing that timely research, Sarah. Our next presentation is by Shakayla Moran, who looks at the impact of engineering design in improving students' authentic experiences in the science classroom. Take it away, Shakayla.
Thanks, Michal. If you were to walk into a science classroom right now, you might see students conducting science experiments like the image on the left. You would see students using generic step-by-step instructions and highly technical, well-designed materials to find a known and desired outcome. It's tempting to say that labs like this are more representative of sophisticated scientific inquiry. Maybe it's because they produce more accurate data, use more precise technology, or just look more sciencey. However, as I will explain in this talk, most of the scientific decisions in a traditional science lab have been made for the students. We implement labs like this in the name of scaffolding, time management, and simply a need to cover a vast range of content. But it all comes at a cost to our students. In the image on the right, students don't know what answer to expect. They have a theory about what happens to absorbed colors and have designed their own structure to test it. The materials that they have chosen, such as shaping the cardboard or picking a particular light source, and the choices that they have made have developed with and from their developing ideas over time. So although the image on the right may appear a little Rube Goldberg or even amateurish, it is, I argue, a missing element in most science classrooms. The act of doing science should be fun, creative, and insightful, and a place where students are allowed to build and design experiments as a way of building their own scientific theory. And the research points us to what this looks like and how to support it. Currently, the research project I am working on focuses on finding opportunities where engineering design is authentically integrated into scientific inquiry. My research project takes us one step further by examining how students use materials to build things as a way of building scientific theory. Examining how students use materials to build things as a way of building scientific theory, my data suggests that the process of creating and building scientific experiments is just as important as the products that these experiments produce. By allowing students to muddle through the unknown and tinker with materials, they not only have a better understanding of how to do science, but we see them developing richer, more nuanced, and informed scientific ideas. And even better than that, when students get to build things, both theories and experiments, they also get to play and have fun with science. And so this research matters because the science classroom should be a place where students not only learn scientific ideas, but participate in the creative, playful, and insightful work of scientific inquiry. This is why scientists love what they do. But for students to develop their own scientific ideas, they need the freedom to develop their own experiments. They need to be able to fail, to learn from their mistakes, and improve their ideas and experiment over time. Materials should be a source of discovery for students in the science classroom. So when students build things, they also build scientific theory. When students have the opportunity to build things and build theory, they develop broader agency around materials and come to consider themselves creators of knowledge, which makes them more engaged in scientific practices and overall better, more playful, and creative scientists. Thank you.
Thanks, Shakayla. Up next, we have Gabriela Rogi, who looks at the impact of attitudes towards gender norms and their effects on perceptions and stereotypes about sex offenders. Go ahead, Gabriela.
Thank you, Michal. So, hello. My research was on the perceptions of sex offenders. Therefore, I'll be discussing sexual violence and victimization. If you need to step away, please do so at any time. I'd like to begin by asking, what do you think of when you hear the word sex offender? Are you thinking of a man or woman? How old is this said person? And does this word conjure up an image of someone you know, or is it a complete stranger? Well, by asking these questions, we are revealing an inner bias we have that creates an image of whom we believe has the ability to commit sex crimes. In 2019, the National Crime Victimization Survey estimated that there were about 460,000 incidences of rape and sexual assault in the US, but only 33.9% of those were reported to police. Official statistics indicate that most sex offenders are male, but these include only offenses reported to officials. Sexual offenses committed by females do occur, though they are rarely reported to authorities because gender scripts have a significant influence on the perceptions and attitudes about who can be a perpetrator. Over the summer, Dr. Laura King and I led a research project examining the perceptions and stereotypes about sex offenders in order to understand if perceptions about gender impact attitudes towards sexual violence. I conducted an online survey to investigate whether Boise State students' understanding of gender roles and prior knowledge regarding sexual crimes and offenders have an impact on who can be a perpetrator. In our results, we found that participants have held similar opinions rejecting traditional gender norms, with responses regarding attitudes about sex offenders being mixed, with support for some gendered perceptions and rejections for others. For example, the majority of participants disagreed or strongly disagreed with statements regarding women's occupational, sexual, and personal expectations. In addition, respondents indicated mixed attitudes towards sexual violence, no matter the sex of the perpetrator. The majority disagreed with the idea that sexual crimes committed by females are less serious than crimes committed by males. Additionally, neither respondent's gender identity nor respondent's major appear to have an effect on perceptions about sex offenders. I believe that it is important that researchers evaluate one's education, bias, and awareness of sexual crimes in order to account for the interactions between gender scripts and how society perceives victims and perpetrators of sexual crimes. Therefore, educating society about the realities of sexual violence can lead to important advancements in both policy and public knowledge about sexual offending and victimization risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela. Our next presentation is by Callie Weisel, who will be sharing with us the powerful ways that she's combined her understanding of her ancestors' tumultuous history, her own identity, and the art of jewelry making. Take it away, Callie.
When you take the land, people, and culture, you take the power. This is a well-known experience that is perpetuated in history. I will be talking about how I gained my power back in my Armenian identity through my jewelry making. Armenia has experienced the loss of land throughout history. Because of the mountains being rich with precious metals and oil deposits, Armenians use a lot of their precious metals for their cultural craft of jewelry making. The colonizer, to take the resources, had to remove what was on top of the land to access it. These were the historical Armenian churches and grave sites. That not only in this were they taking the land and resources, but in destroying these, they were also taking the culture. More recently, in 2020, Artsakh, a land historical to Armenians and our history, got taken from us by Azerbaijan and Turkey. When this was happening, I understood in real time as an Armenian American what it felt like, what it looked like, and I understood in real time as an Armenian American what genocide looked like enacted on my people. Ecocide is always a part of genocide. You take the land, you destroy the land, you destroy the people. In 1915, more than 1.5 million Armenians were murdered at the hands of the Ottoman Empire by marching them through the Syrian desert till they died from exhaustion, mutilation, or starvation in Deir ez-Zor, drowning in the sea because the Ottoman military threw Armenians overboard, or murdering them in their own homes or while escaping. In 2020, over 2,000 Armenians were killed at the hands of Azerbaijan and over 100,000 displaced, many burning their homes as they left. Several war crimes were committed by the Azeri government, funded by NATO, Turkey, and Israel. Further weapons utilized included white phosphorus, which not only destroyed human life, but also caused fires in one of the most biodiverse forests in the world. When I was 22 was the first time I heard the story of the Armenian genocide. I sat down with my older sibling Joel and my dad Robert. They told me what had happened. I got to hear our hurt, but also learn about us and who we were and are. I was able to learn about my Armenian ancestors who were jewelers and tailors. This is what connected me to the core of my Armenian identity and my passion for jewelry making. The attack on Artsakh, to paraphrase our movement, opened the wound of the 1915 genocide. For me personally, also brought a deep sense of anger and sadness that I couldn't get rid of. The only thing that helped me was to make jewelry. These are the Bazor goats. They are the earrings that I'm wearing in this image. They reside in the mountains of Armenia, and I represented them in a pair of earrings made out of recycled wire. They are going extinct. They are representative of Armenia. Like the Armenian people, the Bazor has been around for thousands of years. They have not moved or let the colonizer win. My jewelry and my story as an Armenian American will not either. I've spent my life assimilated and not engaged with that identity, but through my jewelry making, I was able to take back the knowledge of the land, the culture, and the people, and find my power in knowledge, research, and art. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Our last presenter this morning is Rabia Zahid, who will be sharing her research working with resettled refugee families and the importance of focusing on resilience demonstrated by the fathers in these families. Go ahead, Rabia.
There are currently 70.8 million forcibly displaced people around the world. Of these, 25.9 million are refugees. This number is more than the total population of Mexico City, one of the largest cities in the world. Refugees encounter great difficulty in their journey as a family, and as we know, fathers play an essential role in the well-being of the family. However, they remain an untapped resource in most cases, and therefore have historically participated less in research, and this is particularly true for fathers with a refugee background. Unfortunately, much of the literature on refugee studies focuses on the risks and negative consequences of forced migration. With this in mind, our study set out to create a more balanced view of fatherhood during this transition by challenging this deficit theory and shedding light on the positive opportunities this change can bring. We collaborated with a well-known male member of the Congolese community who helped design and conduct interviews with 3 refugee fathers who have resettled in the Boise area within the past 3 years. Interviews were conducted through the phone due to COVID-19 restrictions, and we used thematic content analysis to code and analyze data. These fathers' responses were translated from Swahili to English for data analysis. We found that for all fathers, language was a major barrier that negatively impacted them in their workplace, in their duties as fathers, and caused them to face discrimination. Another barrier was challenges with transportation. What stood out the most was the resilience that these fathers showed in the face of adversity. For example, one father shared, "I had a very tough time understanding English and being able to communicate with others due to the language difficulty. This gave me the strength to pursue and learn English with determination to where I can understand some English even if I'm not all the way there." Another father said, "I used to struggle with transportation, walking to the stores or riding my bike even when it's raining or snowing. From this, I worked hard to learn how to drive and bought my own car." Not surprisingly, the fathers reported that providing for their families was a major source of strength and pride. Contrary to our expectations, however, employment presented itself as a source of support for all fathers rather than a stressor, because all fathers were satisfied with their employment status and overall work situation. All three fathers expressed that being able to provide for their families was one of their biggest motivators. Another strong message that came through all the interviews was that they want agencies to continue providing the current services to help fathers become self-sufficient and achieve their goals for their family's betterment. Lastly, all the fathers we interviewed expressed a common request for their neighbors and local community to be kind and understanding, sharing that they want to have a comfortable enough relationship where they can get help and ask for advice. One father shared, "First is to love each other. Second is to be in good communication and relationship with neighbors and other people here in our society and community." We hope the findings of the study promote a strengths-based perspective that focuses on resilience as an outcome rather than solely on the negative outcomes and risks. We hope this shift assists in adequately presenting these fathers' stories and empowering refugee communities to be seen not as victims, but rather caring parents who have inspiring stories, great determination, and strength. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabia, and thank you to all of our wonderful presenters this morning. I think we can all have a collective round of applause in our respective homes and offices, wherever we might be. And so congratulations to all of you. Outstanding work, everyone. It was wonderful, informative, clear, and thought-provoking. You're all so impressive in your ability to develop and share these projects, and they really have real-world impacts on all of us. So great job, and congratulations. We do have a slide here that allows you to offer a word or phrase of congratulations to our amazing lightning talk presenters. You can scan the QR code with your phone or your mobile device, or you can just join us on slido.com using the code. And so we'll wait for some words of encouragement. And in the meantime, I'll also I'll wait to ask folks to turn their cameras on. So just so everybody knows, we had over 130 participants in the audience today, so that was wonderful. Thank you so much for supporting our students. That was really, really wonderful. Okay. Yay, thank you so much for those words of encouragement. We'll leave the Slido up for some time so that we're able to see that.
This is Donna. I just want to encourage folks to try to get into Slido and do this. When presenting in a webinar, it's been likened to presenting in a closet. We can't see faces. And so this is the way to let our students know that you really did hear them and how wonderful they were. We'll get to Q&A in a minute.
Looking at our participant list in the audience, it looks like we have plenty of students here coming to support their fellow students, but also lots of family members and lots of faculty members and staff. So thank you all for coming today and supporting our students. I can echo some of this. I feel like I've learned so much throughout our rehearsals and today's presentation. Wonderful, wonderful work.
Okay, Michal, should we move to Q&A?
Sounds like a great idea.
Okay,
All right.
I'm going to actually stop sharing for a minute. I'll probably mess up when it's time to share again. But I want to make sure that everybody, let's have the students turn their videos on so we can actually see all of your faces at once.
Yay!
We can applaud you from the stage, so thank you. I think we'll start the Q&A with a general question of, and we'll take the first 3 volunteers, 2 or 3 volunteers, about how has this research experience shaped your learning experience and prepared you for your next career goals? Would anybody like to be the brave one to take that first question? Yeah, Mandy, thank you.
So as a history major, it's really important for me to look at a lot of different documentation and photos. Having to do this online predominantly gave me a lot of insight on how to kind of vouch for the sources that I was looking at and really look at it with that critical lens. Since this is something that I want to do as a career, as a historical researcher, I feel like it definitely benefited everything that I'm doing at the moment and laid a lot of groundwork for my other classes.
Great, thank you. Would anybody else like to answer that? Yeah, Kelly.
For myself, being an anthropology minor, I have realized just how important it is to be able to connect to what you're learning and getting education on within yourself, within your identity and the world you live in, as well as every aspect of your life. And just the fact with my research, being able to not only connect with my Armenian identity and just the history of my Armenian identity, but also being able to find a way to connect it with my creative side and with understanding just how intellectual and intelligent I can choose to be and am as a person. And I'm just finding I'm able to find a lot more strength in that and in my brain and how I think and what my experience is, and just have figured out how to connect everything to just find power in just all those aspects. And I know that because of how I'm feeling with this and this experience and what I've been able to do with this research, it is a feeling and work that I continue to bring with me into the future when I go get my master's degree, when I go do other work within anthropology or outside of it. But I just I really love what I got to learn and the confidence I got to gain from just this project.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I think you used the word empowerment, and I think research can be so empowering, especially when you're working on something that's so close to your own identity and your own history. That's wonderful. All right. One more?
One more? Yeah, Caleb. And then we'll get to Sierra.
So for me, it's been kind of interesting just because I never really considered myself to be much of a programmer or developer. I always kind of consider myself to be a front-end developer. I'm like, oh, I'll do the stuff that looks nice, but I don't want to do the back-end stuff. And jumping into the Suits project has really kind of been a trial by fire moment where I've learned a lot really fast. I've probably learned more in 6 months of that project than my whole time in college. And it's just been a very quick learning experience and been a really good way to learn a lot really fast. And ultimately, it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities I didn't really think of before. I mean, I was kind of just looking to get a job, doing whatever, make some money, call it good enough. And, just because I kind of underrated my own skills. And working on this project is hey, you can do cutting edge stuff that literally no one else is doing yet. Go do it. And it kind of just oh, wait, all right, let's just work on this. It's been kind of a good mental reset to kind of get me going and jumpstart things.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Sierra.
much.
Oh, sorry. You were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, thanks so much. Sierra.
I was just going to say that I think for me, this project did put to action what I want to see in the world, which is this bridge between public health and medicine, because healthcare is not one size fits all. And there has to be some teamwork there. And I think my project really demonstrated that. And it was really exciting to see it in action, because now I know it's possible to extrapolate it to other things as well.
Absolutely.
I'll add that there was a comment put into the Q&A from one of the faculty who is watching this and who says, outstanding work, everyone. Informative, clear, and thought-provoking presentations. You're so impressive in your ability to develop and share these projects that have real-world impacts on people and the interconnected environment and society we live in. What's more, you're teaching specialists in your fields, and you should and could, or could and should, be doing scholarship and teaching differently, that you should be teaching us and you should be teaching all our other scholars because you're doing an amazing job. So I wanted to, it wasn't a question, but it was a comment that was worth sharing. Someone has asked, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your research, if at all, and how have you navigated those challenges? So any volunteers?
I can go ahead. I was initially supposed to interview fathers in person, and I think one of my peers actually touched on this in her project as well. But like making that connection with the community that you're working with is so important. So when you have COVID-19 and you can't even be face to face, and now everything is over the phone or over just a what's it called, survey online, makes it really difficult. So it was just like, already I'm going into a community where I'm not a part of. And then on top of that, I'm a female. So I have to find someone who is a male who's part of the community and, can be trusted by the fathers. And then it was just a little bit even more difficult because, they're trying to have these conversations over the phone, but sometimes, they need a translator and their kids are trying to translate for them. And just even recruiting fathers was such a hassle because, they would feel more comfortable. They said again and again, if I could do this in person, they were willing to talk to us and share their experiences. But it all just went back to like, I don't know, I just feel so uncomfortable over the phone. So that was very challenging and definitely impacted how many fathers we were able to recruit.
I bet.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on impact of the pandemic? Yeah, Caleb and then Kelly.
I know like with the suits team, development got really difficult for a little while there, just because it was a bunch of us kind of talking remotely and working over Trello to try and get software development done. That was kind of hard. Actually, we ended up getting a flow going pretty well though. The hardest part was testing, because at the end of the day, we want to do testing with people that is not us because we built it, so we know how it works. And that's very difficult. And we honestly still have not found a good answer to that. I mean, at the end of the day, it just comes down to one of us, like I'll get my roommate on it and be like, hey, try it. And just anyone who's never tried it. And it's not a great solution, but it works.
I wondered about that, Caleb, with the suits. Is there an actual VR headset that that the participants would have to use? So then there's additional protocols you have to think about, right? With COVID, right? All the sanitation and things like that.
Yeah. Huge challenge. Because normally we'd have like a big testing day and we'd have a bunch of kids come try it and just run through it and basically just like, all right, like do your worst, break our software. And we couldn't really do that this year.
Right. Thanks.
Kelly?
For me, it was fairly unique because at the beginning of this pandemic, I was someone still really confused about my identity and still having a lot of lack of confidence with my intelligence. That not only having an amazing mentor like Shelly Volsch and Amy, but also having like really awesome creative friends around me, like my friend Carnessa, who helped me create this image. I was able to kind of find a lot of confidence in my creativity and my intelligence, as well as just with at the beginning of the pandemic, also the attack on ArtSoc also happened. And it was like a hit on an identity that I at the time was still really getting to learn and know more about. And something that just magically happened and was just community. Like as the attack on ArtSoc happened, as I said, it opened this wound of the 1915 genocide to a lot of Armenian folks. And there's some way that we just all kind of came together and we found each other on social media. We got connected, we found empowerment together and just were able to help each other in ways that we could heal and find ourselves more. And there's just this instilled anger that I just felt with the fact that there was a loss of land we were losing that I didn't realize was such a big deal to me until it happened, that it just gave me a lot of fire to just get more educated, to do this research, to have this knowledge and talk about this information. That if that had not happened, I don't know if I would be at this point. But just like the attack on ArtSoc and everything about community just definitely played a huge role, and how community was as well within this pandemic. Since we couldn't actually be around each other, there's this more of a need for it because of
Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely. I'm wondering if I could ask some of the students whose research was actually, I don't want to say positively impacted, but whose research was actually focusing on COVID-19 related things, right? So there are several of you who whose research was about the different pivots that were made, or the different consequences of COVID-19. Was that your original? I mean, obviously that was not your original research idea a year ago, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you came about, coming onto a project like that.
I can speak to that. Sure. I really did choose this project because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I will be student teaching in a year and a half, and I know that the impacts of virtual instruction will still be continuing. And so really, I joke that it was a selfish research project where I just wanted to know what was going to be happening in the classroom. But even then, there's still so many pivot moments because our environments are always changing because of COVID. So I was planning on doing a survey later in the semester, and then all of Boise School District decided to go fully in person. And I knew no teachers, no parents want to answer a survey about virtual instruction when they're trying to figure out how to get their student or their child to school 5 days a week. So even those pivots still happen because there's so many changes because of the pandemic, even within a project that I chose because of what's happening right now.
Absolutely. Sarah, did you want to also mention something? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sure. So, nursing burnout has been an issue for, years. And so I think, just like I kind of mentioned, the pandemic really exacerbated, anything that already existed. And so it was kind of unique because, as I mentioned, I'm a nursing student and my faculty mentor is an associate professor in the School of Nursing and is also still actively a nurse in the hospital. And so, we both just thought it would be so, informative to kind of study our own population and just kind of get that baseline understanding. And, I think it really does have long-term implications. And so it just seemed like the right time to, really put everything under a microscope.
Wonderful. That's very true. Thanks so much, Sarah. Donna?
Yeah, so I wanted to also just give you another comment that came in through the Q&A. Because we don't have a chat that the audience can chat with you, they're giving us their comments through the Q&A. And one from another professor who is on board said, "Don't lose that passion. I love that you're leading with what inspires you and what makes you curious. This is at the heart of what makes research impactful, meaningful, and fun, which is important. So thank you for being such an important part of our Boise State community." And so thank you to the faculty member who put that in the Q&A. And I think Michal and I wholeheartedly second that comment.
Yes, absolutely.
There was another general question. I'll say that we have a few specific questions. And what I'm going to encourage our listeners is that most of these students have posters as well. And you can go to the Forager One site. We'll give you instructions in a few minutes, and you can leave written comments and questions there that you'll get a direct response, or come to the breakout sessions that start very soon after this ends, so that you can all talk to the students. So we might not get to the specific questions given our time. But another more general question was, first of all, with a comment of amazing job presenters is the way they start the question. Is I would love to know the overview of your process to do research. How long does it take you to reach this current stage of research? And so I'm sure we have some students who are just starting out with thinking about doing research who are listening and would love to know, what was your pathway to being able to get to the point where you could talk about your research like this? Yeah, Mandy.
Go ahead, Mandy.
So I've been working on various degrees of this research on my own for the last several years. I'm one of those weird people that I like just doing research. It's the thing I like to do. When I first thought about doing the undergrad program, I had a huge broad overview that I had no idea how to narrow down. And the more research I did and the further down the rabbit hole I went, it got a little bit easier to narrow the field down. And then I was talking to my husband about some experiences we had with him being mixed race. And it was like this little light bulb clicked. And that really helped me hone my research in. But even as I've been trying to do this presentation, there's still a million different directions and questions I want to answer. So even though I was able to focus it, it also helped provide some like kind of insight and some direction that I want to use going forward in graduate school and then in my own research later down my doctoral path.
That's great.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Yeah, Rosanna. And then Ashley.
So I had a bit of a different type of process as I only started doing research with my mentor last semester. And Heidi Wu, she's been amazing. And I came in not knowing the language that I would be coding in. So I ended up taking a bit of time over a break to teach myself a language and teaching myself the basics. Same with the project we used, the public data set, Illustrious TNG. I had to go through the tutorial and understand all the functions. And they had a lot of words just for one thing. They had like 5 different names for it. So it was a bit of a learning curve for me, but I feel like once I got over that, it felt a lot easier and I felt more confident in my ability to be flexible and adapt to different types of research as well.
That's great. So we'll have Ashley share and then Grace.
And then Grace, yeah.
So I was lucky enough to find a research lab to join here at Boise State several years back. I work with Dr. Mariana de Graaf and her soil science lab. So I've been studying with her for a few years now, just assisting on other projects, and got a grant to start this project, which is really cool because I've been working on it for a while, and hopefully it's looking like it's going to lead into starting my graduate degree next year, which I'm really stoked about. So, yay.
That's wonderful. That's great. Thanks, Ashley. Grace?
I just wanted to add kind of to what everyone's been saying too, that for me, I have an AC going on. For me, I've been with the project for about 2 years now with Dr. Warner, and it's a joint project. So to get to where we started and then to what I presented on, it's been a long process, a lot of different steps to make each molecule. So there's that. But really to start for me, I just went to a teacher's office hours and I was like, how do I get involved in research? What venues do I go through to start looking at what projects are available? She gave me some websites, gave me some tips of like how to approach a mentor. And then I did that. And then you go from there on what you're curious about. So the biggest thing is like, go to professors, faculty, even friends that have done this and be like, hey, how'd you get involved? And they're always usually willing to help, and you never know what kind of happens after that initial encounter. So good luck to anyone who's wanting to get involved in research.
That's a wonderful piece of advice, Grace. I think what students might not find, what students might not understand is that all of us as faculty members, we love our research, we love our students. This allows us to combine our research with our students, and we love talking about our research. So if you ask your faculty members about their research, and if they mention it in class and it sounds fascinating, ask them about it. Ask them if there are any opportunities to work on their research team. It doesn't have to be a science teacher. And if you find that you have a project in one of your classes that you want to develop into a bigger research project, you can also do that. So that's really wonderful. Thanks, Grace.
So I'm going to ask someone from Event Services is going to take a screenshot because this is our last time to get all of our Lightning Talk speakers together. So attendees, please bear with us for a second so that nobody's eyes are closed and everybody's looking at the camera. Smile, and we'll get a screenshot.
Perfect. Got it.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to give some heads up about how the rest of the day of our undergraduate research showcase is going to continue. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and I'll try to share the right screen and not mess up this time. Let's see here. PowerPoint.
One last thank you to all of our presenters. Yay.
Yes, and that's why I left this slide up, because great job, and we are so proud of you. Okay, I also want to thank our coaches. So all of the Lightning Talk presenters were offered assistance by a faculty member or staff at Boise State. And those of you who are listening, if you want to be a coach in a future year, just send an email to studentresearch@boisestate.edu and we will put you on our list. But thank you, coaches. Okay. We have feedback surveys available on our Google site, and someone will put the links into chat so that you can grab them, but you can also just go to the event Google site. And there's one specifically for undergraduate students, which enters you in a drawing for a wonderful prize at the closing session. But
Should we
everybody
tell them
else,
what the prize is?
yeah, we could tell them it's an iPad. So definitely give in a feedback survey. Everybody else, I'm sorry, the prize is only for undergrads, but we still want your feedback. So please take a few minutes to do a feedback form for us anytime during the day. And students, if you're getting extra credit for attending, that's the way to get extra credit. Okay, starting at 11, we have from 11 to 12:30, and then from 1:30 to 3, we have some synchronous poster session breakouts. We invite you to come, but if you want to look at the posters on your own so that you actually know what the poster session speakers will be about, they are posted on a site called Symposium by a company called Forager One. And this slide gives you all the information about how to go see our posters. This is also all up on the Google site for the event. And I can't see the chat while sharing, but I'm assuming someone's putting this into the chat. So if you already have an account, then you just go to our event page, which is the first URL. So if you've been to the Graduate Research Showcase, for instance, then you already have a Forager One account. Otherwise, you need to create an account, and it takes a couple of minutes. So now is a good time to do it before the 11 o'clock session. You go in and it's a free sign up. Sign up with your Boise State email address, or if you're not from Boise State, with the email address that you registered for the event. If you haven't registered for the event and you're not from Boise State, you need to register so we can get your email address added because it is a private event. Once you have your account, then you can go back to our event page and confirm your registration, and you'll be able to explore the posters. And you can leave comments up there. We will take the specific questions that were entered that we didn't get to ask, and we will put them on the comment page for Forager One for those posters presenters. And if you left your name, we'll put your name so that they can respond to you actually directly, but they can also just put other comments in response to the questions. Please remember to engage through social media. If you happen to tweet or use Facebook or Twitter, God, that was good, Instagram, URS 2021 is our hashtag. We look forward to seeing your tweets and Instagram posts. And I think, Michal, that right on time concludes our morning session. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all, and see you at the poster sessions in just a half hour.